2025 was a pretty rough year for MMOs. We barely had any new global releases, and I think the only new MMO that actually released in 2025 was Dune Awakening. The rest were all playtests or just early access or stuff like that. But don't lose hope just yet, because 2026 is set to be absolutely incredible. So in this video, let's go over all the biggest MMOs coming in 2026 so that you know what to expect, and hopefully by the end of it, you'll know what you're most excited about for the coming year. Now, before we start, this list will only include actual full MMO, so no MMO lights or MMO adjacent sort of games. We'll also be rating each game on an excitement meter so that you can get a better idea of which new MMOs you should be really looking out for. Plus, this way, if any of my ratings end up aging poorly, you can always hold it over me and call me a moron, which is, fun for the whole family. Oh, and as always, unfortunately with lists like these, the best we can do is go off of the official release dates, but I'm sure you guys know well enough that in this genre, delays are so common. So common that I wouldn't even be surprised if half this list, legitimately half of this list, does not release in 2026. But again, there's nothing we can do about it, so let's just go off of what we know and get excited anyway so that we can be disappointed later. Alright, with all that out of the way, I can barely wait, so let's go. Okay, so very quickly before we start, the first 5 games I'll be talking about are all made by big studios. Now, most of them are by giant, massive studios with a lot of previous experience in the MMO genre, but a couple of them are by newer studios, but even those have a lot of funding and giant teams behind them. Also, kind of unfortunately, all of these games are by Korean studios. MMOs are still not really considered worth the time and effort in the West, so anything with a large enough scope these days tends to come from the East. Anyway, with that in mind, let's dive into the first 5 MMOs coming this year, all of which are by big, well-funded studios. Aion 2 is an open-world fantasy theme park MMO developed by NCSoft as the sequel to the extremely popular MMO Aion. This game is set to come out in the second half of 2026, but fun fact, it's actually already out in both Korea, South not North, and Taiwan. And second fun fact, I've already reviewed it. Now, in my opinion, it's actually got loads of good and well-designed PvE and PvP content set in a world that is both visually stunning and pretty fun to explore. The combat is smooth and fun, and the classes are also pretty well designed, unique, and interesting enough to play. Unfortunately though, it starts to all fall apart because of the insane, ridiculous amounts of pay to win involved. I'm not exaggerating, I wish I was, but I'm not. It's so bad in the Korean version of the game that the developers had to get on a live stream and publicly apologize for it. Remember, this is the Korean version. Korean MMO players usually don't care about pay to win that much, but even for them, it was just too much to bear. Now, that said, we still do have quite some time before the global release of Aion 2. And hopefully, and it's a massive if they can cut the pay to win all the way back, Aion 2 does actually have the potential to be something really good. I had a good time playing the game and may even have continued to if it wasn't for the fact that pay to win kept popping up literally everywhere I went. So unless they get rid of it, the game has no chance. The real problem is that it's NCSoft, so I have pretty much zero faith in them to make that change. So, because of that, my excitement rating for Aion 2's global release sits at just 1 out of 5. The game looks and plays good, but the pay to win is just too extreme, and I don't realistically see that changing. Chrono Odyssey is a dark fantasy open-world MMO built in Unreal Engine 5 and set to launch in late 2026. This game is developed by a new studio but published by Kakao Games, which is a bit of a red flag, but definitely far from the worst. And earlier in 2025, we did get a closer look at the game through a public playtest. Visually, oh gosh, the game is incredible. The fact that it's made in Unreal Engine 5 is not at all hard to believe because it was honestly maybe one of the prettiest MMOs I've ever seen. The world was detailed, well crafted, and had a good amount of content to go through, including an expansive crafting system, which I always love to see. Now, the main gimmick of the game is the time manipulation mechanic, which allows you to freeze enemies, rewind time, etc. And while this did sound pretty crazy for an MMO when they first announced it, all it actually really is just another skill system that works sort of like Tracer's kit from Overwatch. Now, all that said, during the playtests, the game was definitely lacking polish. The weapon switching combat was pretty janky, and the game overall had lots of bugs and was, in general, pretty poorly optimized. They have responded to this feedback, promising significant changes and pushing the release date back to fix those performance issues. But since we haven't actually seen any of the changes made, we can only hope that they've done a good job. This game will most likely be free to play, but since the playtest did not include a cash shop at all, we'll just have to wait, see, and hope that it won't be pay to win, even though it is a Korean MMO. All in all, I'm fairly optimistic. So Chrono Odyssey gets a solid 3 out of 5 on the excitement meter. It actually has a lot of potential, but I can't be fully excited about it without seeing if they've actually fixed the issues the game had during the playtest. Bellatores is an open-world fantasy sandbox MMO, also made in Unreal Engine 5 and set to launch in the second half of 2026. This is supposedly a hardcore PvP-oriented game that is anti-theme park and focuses on creating a dangerous living world and giving the player as much freedom as possible to explore it. It's of course another Korean MMO, so as you'd expect from what we've seen so far, it is absolutely gorgeous. It features a seamless open world that's promised to be gigantic in scale, and all that freedom also means that the game is built around player-driven content like large-scale faction warfare, player-driven economies, and extensive crafting and exploration. All good things. Now, in terms of combat, Bellatores will have an action combat system, but it'll be much slower paced than what you usually find to emphasize sort of heavier, weightier attack instead of fast combos and a bunch of key presses, which I actually really like the idea of. Everything on paper looks great. The only real concern for me, but it's a really big one, is how they're gonna balance this game. Usually, hardcore PvP sandbox MMOs tend to be downright miserable experiences for anyone not in the largest guilds full of people who hate both sunlight and social interaction. If they can create an experience that's enjoyable for both true hardcore players and casual players, this could be a massive hit. But if they can't, retaining anyone but the most lifeless players is going to be a pretty difficult thing to do. Now, as for monetization, we have no idea at all. And while it being a Korean MMO does set off some pay-to-win warning alarms, we'll just have to wait and see before we make any real judgments. Overall though, I'd give Bellatores a solid 3 out of 5 on the excitement meter. The only concerns I have are the PvP balancing and whether it'll actually release this year, since they haven't even done a public playtest yet. Unfortunately, those are both pretty big question marks. MapleStory Classic World is probably the one that most people are the most excited for, and as I'm sure you can guess, it's essentially old school MapleStory. It's a completely official MMO by Nexon that takes you all the way back to a pre-Big Bang version of the game, and it's set to come out in the second half of 2026. Now, if you're not sure what that is, Big Bang was essentially the update that started modern MapleStory, with its insanely flashy skill effects, gacha, and ridiculous amounts of pay to win. It's what pretty much everyone refers to as the end of the golden era of MapleStory. In fact, pre-Big Bang is by far the most popular version of MapleStory you'll find on private servers, so people have been wanting it for a very long time. I've been waiting for this for a very long time as well, and with MapleStory Classic World, we're finally getting it. Now, it won't be a one-to-one recreation because they are making a bunch of quality of life changes, improving performance, and overall getting ready for it to be something similar in concept to old school RuneScape, where the game will receive updates and grow over time in parallel to modern MapleStory. I think this is a good idea because if they don't add any new content over time, people will play for a while and then the game will eventually die off. But that said, it is Nexon, so I would never blame you for being concerned that they're gonna mess it up. They have said it won't be pay to win and that they won't make any major changes to the game, but again, we can only hope for the best. Still though, credit where credit is due. The reboot servers for modern MapleStory do show that Nexon are both interested and capable of providing an experience for players that isn't plagued by pay to win. That gives me a lot of hope that MapleStory Classic World will not have pay to win either, and instead be primarily monetized off of cosmetics. Still, without any public playtest as of yet, we can only wait and see whether the game actually lives up to the classic MapleStory experience or not. For me though, right now, this is actually a 5 out of 5 on the excitement meter. I know Nexon isn't fully trustworthy, but the reboot servers give me just enough hope to hang on to, and I love classic MapleStory, and I play a lot of it on private servers, so I can't wait for this game. Ragnarok Online 3 is another massive sequel MMO from South Korea, set to release in the second half of 2026. This is an open world MMO that supposedly takes you back to the glory days of Ragnarok Online, with the same sort of art style, graphics, and gameplay that we all fell in love with when we were kids. To be fair, they do actually do that pretty well. The game looks and feels, at least on the surface level, just like I remember, and the wave of nostalgia that hit me was both fast and really strong. The music especially, man, I was like 8 again, playing Ragnarok Online on a CRT monitor. It's crazy. Unfortunately though, like most modern Korean MMOs, early playtests showed heavy amounts of pay to win. We obviously don't have anything final yet, but so far, it's bad. Pets who fight with you and are extremely important are straight up locked behind gacha, and things like gear upgrading is fully RNG based. Maybe worst of all, the game comes with both auto battling and auto farming, so you don't actually even need to play it. Now, the game might have a good launch in Asia, fueled entirely by the nostalgia, and to be honest, it'll probably be a huge success on mobile. But I personally have genuinely zero interest in playing a gacha auto battler MMO. So that means that Ragnarok Online sits at a measly 2 out of 5 on the excitement meter. I'm not delusional enough to think that the core concept of this game will change, and as long as it's an auto battler and has auto farming, it honestly actually just deserves a 1 out of 5. It only gets an extra point because unfortunately they did nail the nostalgia, because the way it looks and sounds makes me feel like Anton from Ratatouille. Alright, so those are the big studio MMOs. The next 3 MMOs on this list are all by indie developers. They're all smaller in scope and created by a small, often crowd-funded team. One of them is actually even created by a single person. This means that they may not be as expansive or as filled with content as the bigger games, but at the same time, they're built with a ton of genuine love for MMOs. They're all made by people who've played MMOs for years and see the issues with the genre and want to do something about it. They won't necessarily be better than the big MMOs, because I mean, let's be honest, love and passion alone can't create a good game, but in general, I'm always more excited about MMOs built by people who actually love them, rather than investors looking to make money. Okay, so that all said, let's go ahead and take a look at the next 3 MMOs coming out this year, all of which are indie titles. SpiritVale is an indie MMO created by a single developer, inspired by the original Ragnarok Online, and it's already in early access, hopefully releasing sometime this year. It has a simple, cartoonish, chibi-esque art style that is honestly really charming, and a class system that consists of tiers where you can start as one class and upgrade to another as you level it up. Now, like I said, the game is already in early access, and you can play it right now, and in fact, I did play it. I had a really good time playing it. The classes are all pretty unique, with a lot of customization options in terms of your build, both with the skill trees and the gearing options, which means that each class will more or less have multiple viable ways to play it, which actually makes for a really interesting system. Combat itself is also pretty fun and fluid, and while there are lots of bugs and networking issues, the only real issue I have with SpiritVale is that there's really not a lot to do besides killing things. There aren't really any crafting systems or even PvP, so if you're not into farming mobs or farming bosses, there's nothing really for you to do in the game. Now that said, it is still in early access, and while it's a bit concerning that it's being developed by one person, which to be honest, even a small team doesn't seem very sustainable for an MMO long term, it's still super fun, even in its current state. I actually love this game. I've already played it for like 100 hours, and even though the early access technically came out last year, I'm still gonna include it in this video because I think it's important for us to support projects like these, ones made with genuine love for the genre. And so if you haven't heard of it, well, there you go. SpiritVale is set to be free to play when it fully releases, and if the early access is any indication, there will be no pay to win either. So in its current state, I'd give SpiritVale a strong 4 out of 5 on the excitement meter. The only thing that's preventing it from getting a perfect score is the lack of content. But don't get me wrong, this game can easily be a 5 out of 5 with a little bit more time. Monsters and Memories is an indie MMO that tries to emulate the earliest days of the genre, and it's set to come out sometime in late 2026 with lots and lots of playtests being conducted regularly. This game is designed around the classic MMO experience, and I mean really classic. Not classic like classic World of Warcraft or old school RuneScape, but going even further back to the very first big MMOs. It's very reminiscent of games like Dark Age of Camelot and EverQuest, with a world that not only doesn't hold your hand, but actively tries to bite your fingers off. It's difficult. It's genuinely difficult from the moment you start, and you'll have to figure everything out as you go. And the game puts a lot of emphasis on working together with other people to progress. All of these things are really good, and things I genuinely miss in MMOs. Now, I've played a couple of the playtests, and more are upcoming, but from my experience, the game is pretty fun most of the time, and actually really nails that hardcore extra old school vibe. Unfortunately though, while it definitely does get pretty close to feeling like it's from 1999, the problem is that they've brought back not only the good and the fun bits, but the bad and annoying parts too. The thing is that back when EverQuest first came out, a lot of things that make your life easier and the game more fun and streamlined didn't exist because the genre was extremely new, and the technology honestly just wasn't there for that level of unnecessary complexity. Neither of those things are true today, and Monsters and Memories suffers greatly from being fun to play like 60% of the time and being annoying and boring 40% of the time, because you're either lost, running around, or just like very tediously killing a bunch of mobs for a specific item or something like that. There are just a lot of extremely dull moments in this game. Now, as for monetization, it's still way too early to know which model we'll get on release, but playtests are entirely free to play, so right now I have no complaints. All in all, Monsters and Memories gets a very solid 3 out of 5 on the excitement meter. I think it's got a lot of potential to be a massive niche hit with anyone that misses what it was like in the very earliest days of MMOs. And to be honest, all they'd have to do to make it truly amazing is polish it up so that they just keep the fun stuff and get rid of the annoying parts. Apogea is an indie MMO that promises a classic MMO experience mixed with modern MMO features and is set to launch sometime in 2026 with regular playtests planned in the future. This is a low fantasy game designed around immersion, exploration, and lots of different systems to interact with. The game does feel a bit like an old school MMO from the graphics to the music to the world, but it's built from the ground up with modern players in mind. It promises a slower progression with a lot of small scale social interaction instead of large-scale activities like a lot of newer MMOs. But at the same time, it features an action combat system and a more classless sort of progression that is more common in newer MMOs. The idea is to have the best of both worlds, and from what we've seen so far, I'm not gonna lie, it looks straight up amazing. Now, they do plan on having a playtest on the 16th of this month, January 2026, and that'll give us a much better look at the current state of the game. But from the previous playtest, everything checks out really nicely. The combat looks fluid and reasonably deep without becoming overly complicated, and the game really does push you to forming small groups to play with. There's so much to do in this game already, and it's not even close to being released, so I'm just so excited. The art style is really cool, and the world looks super fun to explore, and overall, the game genuinely feels a bit like Tibia meets Ultima Online meets Project Gorgon, but with a lot of streamlining done to make it work as a modern MMO. Everything. I genuinely cannot think of a single thing that looks bad in this game. Everything looks and sounds really amazing. Now, monetization is naturally a question we probably won't get a concrete answer for a while, but as with all the other games in this list, the playtests have been completely free to play. So again, no complaints there. All in all, if you couldn't already tell, Apogea gets my second 5 out of 5 rating on the excitement meter. This game checks literally every box on my list, and I genuinely can't wait for the upcoming playtest to jump in and check it out. Again, that's on the 16th of January, so make sure you guys don't miss it either. Alright, so there you have it. 8 games, 8 MMOs set to come out in some form this year, which is actually a lot. I think even if only half of these actually end up coming out, 2026 would still end up being one of the most packed years in recent history for this genre, which, to be honest, even if all of these games are really bad, it makes me really happy. I love seeing a renewed interest in MMOs, and some of these games are clearly made with genuine love for the genre, and that makes me even happier. Hopefully that interest will only grow and not only bring us good new games, but MMOs that will last over time without falling apart. Now, whether that'll happen or not, we'll have to wait and see how everything shakes out through the year, but you don't have to worry about that too much because I'll be here playing every single one of these on release and letting you guys know what they're all about. For now though, I want to hear from you. What do you think about the new MMOs coming this year? Are you particularly excited about any of them? Do they all look terrible to you? Surely they can't, because some of these actually look really nice. Anyway, let me know in the comments comments below, and I'll be going back and forth with you guys as we always do. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.